Hello, this is Dylan Moore, your host at iRead TV, and today I have Diane Hardy as a guest, who is the founder and executive director of the Mom and Pop Alliance of South Carolina, and is also a CSG, or Center for Self-Governance student, and a business owner with 35 employees. And I wanted to bring her on today to ask her a little bit about her experience as a CSG student, and what she's been able to accomplish in the realm of systematic politics, and what she's been able to do with the Mom and Pop Alliance to give an example of what's possible for anybody out there to do at a political level that isn't necessarily getting elected or getting your candidate elected. So first of all, Diane, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and giving us your time. So,
okay.
First and foremost, could you tell us a little bit about the Mom and Pop Alliance of South Carolina?
Sure. Yeah. The Mom and Pop Alliance is an organization that I got the idea for it about 18 months ago, kind of in the middle of COVID. And at the time, fortunately, because of all my Center for Self-Governance training, I had really good relationships with a lot of my state legislators, and we can talk about that later, I guess.
Absolutely.
But, at the time, I called them and asked them, who is down in our state house speaking for the small businesses of our state? And they said, you really don't have much representation down here. So that, on top of about 5 years ago when we opened our business, obtaining the certificate of occupancy was like moving a mountain. I don't know why. And I thought at first maybe it was just me having a bad experience, but then I talked to a lot of other business owners and they were going through the same thing. And so I thought, this is crazy. Why should this be so incredibly difficult? We ended up opening 5 months after we were expected to. And, I could have been employing people. We could have been up and going. And so from that experience and then COVID, those two experiences that I had really made me think that small businesses needed a much stronger voice with the policymakers in our state. And so I've decided to start the Mom and Pop Alliance. I do it strictly. We have a small nominal membership fee. We're building a coalition across the state of small business owners. I don't take any income from it personally at all. I volunteer at my time, as well as my husband and the other business owners that are helping me with it. And it's been really great because we're hearing from business owners from across the state, all kinds of things that I would have never even thought of, building relationships with the elected officials down there. And it's just been really needed. I learned that we have almost 400,000 small businesses in our state, and yet they have very little voice. The Chamber of Commerce really looks out for big business, and we may be able to partner with them on some things. And but there really isn't. The NFIB does some good work with small business, but they are more national in scope. So I felt there was a real need for this and wanted to fill that need.
Awesome. I mean, so would it be fair to say that the Mom and Pop Small Alliance is something like a lobby group for the state?
Yeah, we actually focus on three things. We a little bit more than that, but we focus on education. We let the members know about bills that are down there. In our state house last year, there were 1,900 bills in both chambers. So we find the ones that we think small business owners would care about, give them a little Cliff Notes version of that in our newsletter. So we're keeping them up to date what's going on. We also provide connections. So we've host roundtable events with the elected officials, talking directly with the small business owners, and that has been great. Really good listening sessions, bringing those two worlds together, because it was my opinion that the elected officials and the business world, they're both really busy in their respective fields and weren't really having enough communication between the two of those. So we foster communication in that way. And then, yes, we're down there advocating for certain bills, but that's just a part of what we do.
Part of what you're. I mean, it sounds like you're really filling a need that was missing in the state. And bringing it back to what you just said, that it sounds like that the communication wasn't there, and you're facilitating that communication. I know there's a tendency to think about the one's own state legislature and be like, oh yeah, they're not listening to us. They don't care about anything that what's going on, and that they're just going to do whatever they're going to do. Which, I mean, maybe there's some truth to that, but I think it sounds like what you're finding out is that just no one's made any attempt to communicate. And are you finding that the state representatives are open to the ideas of the business owners now that they've finally had a chance to have that communication facilitated?
Yes, I found that they are, and fortunately we have several here who are small business owners, and that helps a lot. But even the ones who aren't small business owners, yes, and I think it has to do with the way you go about doing it. The tone and the relationship that you build with them. So it's a really respectful, collaborative type relationship with them when we do this. It's not, sending them nasty emails or anything like that. So it's been great. And it's been good for business owners too, to feel comfortable with that face-to-face contact and starting to know who they are.
Mm-hmm. And then would you say that your CSG training is what helped you figure out that tone to approach them with?
Most definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
The CSG training, I started taking it, in 2013 maybe. So it's been a good while. And that really helped me. Before that, I was almost what you would call maybe a Tea Party activist. I don't know. I didn't think of myself that way. But so I was running around doing whatever, I'm going to this rally and I might be going down and testifying at the State House. But I was running around doing all this stuff, but there was no real coordination to it. And I wasn't really building relationships with anybody in the legislature. I was running around doing all these tactics with no strategy at all. And CSG taught me to the importance of building the relationships, which I've been doing over time. So when COVID happened, I had the cell phone numbers of 20 legislators.
Right.
But I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't taken that time over the years to build those good relationships with them. And we also offer to help them. We have a small team of students. Like one of the things they asked us to do was to read the education bill in our state. It was 60 pages long.
And I'm sorry, who's they? The state legislatures asked you to?
The state legislators,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. And so we help them if they ask us to on things. Also, if they were looking for legislation for something, we'll try and craft it or find it for them. And so we have just a really good collaborative relationship with a lot of them. Not all of them, and I'm willing to meet with any of them. I just recently met with, even though I'm a conservative personally, I met with a Democrat in the southern part of the state. I was going down there and let her know about that I was coming down. She said, well, let's get together for coffee. And I told her right up front, I said, personally, I'm a conservative, but the Mom and Pop Alliance is nonpartisan, and we are working to any policy that would help small business owners. So trying to let go of some of the partisanship stuff really was helpful from the training. And there was a lot of other things I learned from the training too. That was just one of them.
So did I catch that correctly, that the state legislators are coming to you for help and guidance? I mean, and not you specifically, but you and the group for help and guidance in crafting legislation?
Yes, they are.
And is that, and I'm sorry, is that the Mom and Pop Alliance or is that the CSG group?
That's the CSG group. Yeah, I actually do both, the Mom and Pop Alliance and the CSG group, and they're two separate things. But the CSG group, we've been up and going for several years now. So we've built that trust between us, and we'll even host events. We tell them, when we do have our events, it's we tell them we won't, no Facebook, social media. We're just here to help you, and we'll have 20 of them come to an event we might put on.
That's astounding. I'm sorry, I got to sit back and say that's it. You're just describing it as so matter-of-factly, but let me repeat that. You've got a small group of people where 20 state legislators are willing to come and listen to you to determine how to craft legislation on both sides of the political aisle. Do I have that right? I would
say on that part, it's both sides of the political aisle. The Mom and Pop thing, where I live, there aren't a lot of Democrats really. So when it comes to crafting that legislation, that is not both sides of the political aisle. But with the Mom and Pop, I work with both sides of the political aisle.
I understand. But I mean, even if one of them isn't both sides of the political aisle, that level of influence, that's huge. Yeah. And I mean, with 20 of them, I mean, how many state legislators? expect you to know off the top of your head, but I don't think, I presume it's not like Congress where there's like 400 of them. I'm guessing there's probably like 80.
Well, the State House, and we have 46 senators. It's 170 total with the senators.
Okay, well, 20, that's over 10%. That's incredible.
And so this whole thing, when they tell you that it's all about money and it's all about, they won't listen to you if you're not their constituent. Yes, they will if you build up the relationship over time.
So talk about building up the relationship over time. So you mentioned that you started taking the CSG training in 2013. Can you describe what you were like or what your situation was like before this and what you were able to turn it into from your training?
Yeah, well, before this, I was going to Republican meetings, which I did for years, and really realized that I had nothing to show for that. It wasn't really effective. I was what they call a president in my precinct. I went to those meetings for years to really no avail. I don't think it really mattered. Then I did organize. I ran our Tea Party meetings, so I would run around and plan those and get a speaker and get the room and all that, and be sure that I had lots of people coming, and always concerned about that. And then, like I said, I would occasionally go do other things. And at the end of the day, I felt like I was just on this wheel and I had absolutely nothing to show for all my efforts.
Right.
And so I took the first CSG class, and they started, for me, gosh, they had to explain to me the difference between a democracy and a republic at that time, fully understanding it, not realizing one of the things that they explained about democracy and republic that I found so interesting is, if you think of a democracy as something that you're engaged in once every 2 years for 10 minutes when you go vote, right?
Right.
But a republic, you're engaged in it as part of your lifestyle, as almost like a daily basis. So I started thinking it is how it's different, and then that means my engagement and my civic authority needs to be different. And so while I was putting in time, I also wasn't doing it effectively. So then I had to change that too. And I started doing what they suggested. The first thing is what they call our Block 1 homework, where you just meet with an elected official, a local one, maybe not even somebody you like. I met with someone who's not one of my favorite elected officials, and you just get to know them. And it's so interesting because when you do that, and people say, "Oh, I've done that. I've met with my elected officials." But you didn't
do it this way. Yeah.
You didn't do it this way. And they say, "Yeah, I think I did." But no. And so the way you do it is you go and just get to know them, and you listen, and you ask them, what's it like being in office? Is it hard on your family? Are you glad you did it? Was it what you thought it would be? If you had a magic wand, what would you like to change? And just get to know them as a person. And it's so interesting because they'll say, well, I'm really, really busy. I'm going to say, it'll just be 10 minutes. It's just a civics class.
And they'll talk for an hour, right?
Yeah, sometimes more. Yeah. So that started it. And then I just kept doing that with different folks. And so that was part of it. And then we have the people here who have taken the training, and we have a really small group. You know, I was so worried about having a big Tea Party group and the more people, and it really didn't matter if there were 30 people in the chairs or 40 really in the end. But this is a small group of well-trained people. We work great together. We're real supportive of each other. And it's very fulfilling. You don't get burnt out. It's very emotionally fulfilling.
That's awesome. And then can you give a couple of examples of maybe some of the goals that you and the group have created, and how you've been working toward those goals, and what sort of successes and failures that you've had?
Yeah. So we're focusing a little more on systematic politics. You've heard the saying, the issue isn't the issue. So we've all been able to very easily, well, I shouldn't say, in the beginning it took a little effort to drop our personal issue, because most of us, there was something. And then
for the sake of someone who may have heard this for the first time, can you explain the issue isn't the issue?
Yes.
So
sometimes we're very focused on our issue. It could be Common Core, it could be gun rights, it could be abortion, whatever your issue is.
Your personal, this is the most important thing to me issue. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And what helped me because mine was Obamacare. And so the instructor said, Diane, you realize you could stomp out Obamacare and still lose the Republic, right? And then I was like, oh, yeah. And so, and now that I see that the issues can also be used as a distraction. So if you keep focusing just on issues and candidates, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. You can continue to do that, but I'm asking people to consider adding systematic politics into their liberty work or into their civic engagement, I guess is a better way of saying it. And so if you're going to add systematic politics, then Center for Self-Governance is a great way to learn that, because maintaining our system of a 7-boundary republic, which is something else you learn in CSG, what that is and why we need to maintain
Absolutely.
it, is so if you're just working on your issue and there are people who would like to see the 7-boundary republic replaced or dissolved, then you can win your issue but lose the republic.
Right.
And so what we focus on, so when we meet as a team, is we're going through our state constitution, and we're learning our state constitution. We're learning the boundaries and controls of our state. And we're looking at legislation that might shore up some of that, not necessarily what I want personally. So you have to let go of that, your personal issue and look at the big picture of this, the boundaries and controls of the system.
And just to give an example of that, I'm aware, I don't know if we had the same instructor, likely we did, that in Washington State, we just got ourselves a new capital gains tax that is really looking like an income tax. And then in Washington State, there is no personal tax return, or there hasn't been. They only do it on businesses, and you don't file a personal tax return. Well, now we got one. And our instructor was saying that if you focus on that issue, you think it's a loss. But the CSG students, instead of focusing on that issue, decided to focus on the issue of regional healthcare authorities, which the regional healthcare authority is where the tyranny is supposed to be brought in with all this COVID stuff, is to get these regional authorities that splatter over the state in different geographical areas from the typical counties, and that's done on purpose to muddle where the boundaries are. And the new rules and regulations were going to come through there and be enforced through these regional healthcare authorities. Well, CSG students in Washington State were able to kill that in legislative committee. However, in order to do that, they had to let the capital gains tax slide and get through. And so that was the sacrifice. Yeah. As much as capital gains pisses me off,
yes,
it's not as bad as the regional healthcare authorities.
Yes, because that had to do with truly losing a control. And
yes.
Once those boundaries and controls are lost, you'll never gain them again. So, yeah. So that's fantastic. That's a fantastic example of systematic politics. And it's not saying you never work on issues. You can do both, but it's just where your priorities are. And given that nobody is focusing on systematic politics, if we care about our nation and care about our system, and the neat thing is that systematic politics should transcend party. Because, most Democrats most of them don't want oppressive, losing their control and their voice either. So.
Precisely. So, and I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's great. I think that's a fantastic example.
That was an example of what's going on in Washington. Please give me the examples of what's going on in South Carolina with your team. Yeah.
So, well, we have a bill that is that the legislature took up last session. It didn't pass, but we'll be talking to them about it this week. We're having another meeting with them next week, and it is shoring up the Bill of Rights in South Carolina. So executive orders will not be recognized in this state.
And then this is the federal Bill of Rights or the state's own Bill of Rights.
The federal bill.
Okay.
But if our state attorney would not recognize anything that violates the federal Bill of Rights in our state.
Okay, got it.
We have a good relationship with our state attorney general. And so that's one of them that we worked on last year that has to do with a boundary or control, because that would be more of a 10th Amendment boundary rather than a local boundary. There was also an incident years ago where they were trying to take over our local ambulance system. And we were able to block that and keep the control at the county level where it needed.
And then who was they? The state?
Well, it was actually like the health system, but the health system was tied to a huge health system, and it was
layers of regional government, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. So just paying attention to those boundaries and controls, because they are invisible and we're not aware of them and we're not taught about them in school. And so I think people just need to take the training so they can understand all that, because it's something you've never heard anywhere else.
Well, yeah. And then, I mean, for example, these ambulances, not only is it something I've never heard of anywhere else, I never would have thought to think of ambulances as like a boundary of control. And I think that's a perfect example where not only are these boundaries, but these boundaries are made up of little bits of stuff all mashed together. And the forces that would like to see these boundaries dissolved, they're not coming in and going, okay, we're just going to merge the legislature and the executive power and just move on from there. They're not doing it that way. They're doing all this little stuff like who controls the ambulances? Well, the county controls the ambulances. So if we can get that control over to this piece of regional government where the typical Republican government can't access it, because in the county, you can access your elected officials and say, well, I think we should do this or that with the ambulance. Once it goes over to that regional government, you don't who are you supposed to talk to at that point, right?
And most people don't even, if you ask them what's regional government, they've never even heard of it.
Right.
And considering that it's having such a tremendous influence on our nation, it's in just about every county in the country. What are there, 9,000 regional governments?
I think it's 90 is what.
Maybe it's 90.
Our structure, yeah.
90. So we all need to be much more aware of regional government. And what's interesting is that ambulance issue, talk about letting go of your issue. What happened was we met with this was when we were more early CSG students, we met with 4 of our county council members, and we hadn't known them really well, but we said, what's going on? What could you use help with? What do you think the citizens need to be aware of? And they're like, well, they're trying to take up our ambulances. We're like, yeah, we didn't know that.
Yeah.
So if we hadn't done that initial meeting with them, and it was just one of those, like I said, no agenda, and we did not go in there with a purpose or agenda. We just went in there to listen. And they're the ones who told us about that. We didn't even know about it.
Yeah. Well, and then I mentioned this on a call that I did with another CSG student, is that when I did the homework, and it's just like you said, I ended up talking to 2 county councilmen and 1 councilwoman. I couldn't get them to shut up. Right? I mean, one of them, like at some point, I'm like, I got to get off the phone and go back to work, right? And both of them, I would say, were on politically the opposite side of the aisle from me. And I didn't bring up any of my politics. I think I just there's just like 2 questions to ask, like, why did you decide to do this, and what's the most important thing on your agenda? And they're just like blah 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 blah. And with the second one, by the end of the phone call, this wasn't even me coming back later. She was already asking me for advice about something.
Would see, yeah.
I was like,
it's amazing, isn't
whoa,
it?
yeah.
Yeah, and we need to bridge that divide across the aisles. I mean, we see that we can't be fostering more division, and it's just so great that they only have people come to them who are
pissed off,
want something from them. They want something, or they're upset with something, and that's miserable. And nobody tries to get to know them as a person.
Right.
And when you have citizens, and I'm not saying there's never a place to have a stick with your elected officials, but if you have citizens that are always giving their elected officials a hard time, and that's the only time they hear from them, what we're doing is we're causing more of a disconnect.
Where they don't want to hear from us.
They don't want to hear from us, and they hang out more with each other, and they hang out more with lobbyists. I mean, you don't see lobbyists doing that.
Right. Because they know better. Yeah.
Yes. So we think that's what we need to do, because that's what everybody says. Call them and give them a hard time, and that just causes them to be more isolated from the citizen. So in the long run, I don't think it's good.
Well, and then it's also so. I feel like it's so much easier, right? When you go and you talk to these people and you just get them to talk about themselves, and everybody relaxes, and now it's like, okay, well, here's this issue that's on the table of money or ambulances or whatever, and the guy's going, I don't know what to do about this. And then you go, well, what if you think about it this way? And then suddenly he or she's listening to you, and you're affecting the decision that they're about to make. And it's like it's that simple.
And that brings us to the story of Mrs. Powell, which I did not know before I took the training. And that story just, I mean, it changed my life. It so impacted me. And, Mrs. Powell is a woman from history that probably doesn't get the recognition and the credit she deserves. And most people will maybe know that she's the one who asked Benjamin Franklin, "What have you given us?" And he said, "A republic if you can keep it."
Yep.
But we wish he had said 7-boundary republic. Then
so we could be more clear. Yeah.
Yeah. But so he said a republic if you can keep it. But what's amazing about her, and our very first Center for Self-Governance conference was at her home in Philadelphia. And we actually took our classes in the rooms of her house. And, we were on the living room where the first 3 American presidents danced. She used to hold these social gatherings, but she was very bright and very engaged politically. And she was able, it was because of her that she was able to talk George Washington into running for a second term.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was exhausted and she was able to talk him into serving for a second term. So she influenced the history of our nation in so many ways. That was just one of the ways. And so we as citizens need to learn from that. That's more what the founders envisioned. They envisioned that we would have, the farmer next door would be our representative and we would have a relationship with him. And they didn't want this separation of the political class of the governed and the governing.
Right. Well, and I think they also didn't expect the population explosion.
No,
there's something to be said about the fact that, okay, yes. I'm representing 450,000 people. I can't talk to them all.
Yeah, that's true. But because so few people are doing that, and if you do it in a positive way, like I said, you're willing to help them. I mean, I show them a lot of empathy. One of the ladies I spoke to, she said, Diane, I got 7 calls on Christmas Eve. So it's good to hear things from their perspective.
And I'm sure they were all negative, right? Like calls,
and so they really appreciate that they have citizens to go to that can be a sounding board for them and that they trust. They know that we don't air what they tell us. We don't, and they know they can trust us. And that's taken time to build up, but it's great.
Yeah. Does your CSG group have any immediate or even medium term, or even long, whatever goals that they have? Can you tell us a little bit about the goals of your CSG group and what they want to accomplish, in wherever they have their sights set?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have some state legislation that we're working on. We work a lot at the state level. We've done some local stuff, but we do, and we're building up more relationships with our school board now because we're realizing that was one level of government that we hadn't been as strong in. None of us had kids in school anymore. But that's another thing with CSG is paying attention to all the levels of government and building relationships at all of them. So between your whole team, you can kind of get that. One person can't do that, but between a team, we can say, okay, who knows this guy on our team? And, so that's one of the things is we're building those relationships at every level of government. One of the things we were looking at was our state constitution. It said about foreign entities buying land, like a foreign company. And that we found out that in South Carolina, it's 500,000 acres that they could buy per person.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's an awful lot.
And that's in the Constitution, or that's statute.
Well, the fact that it needs to be limited is in the Constitution.
Oh,
the statute is the 500,000.
So it needs to be limited, and we limit it at infinity.
Yes, exactly.
Got it.
You got it.
Yep.
So anybody looking at the Constitution will say, "Well, that's good. They limited it," but unless you go into the statute and look, so it's. So I see now how much more helpful this is working as a team and finding these things out than just running around, planning an IRS rally or something, which is what I used to do. Right.
And then, speaking to the Constitution, I took the CSG Washington State 101 Constitution class, and it wasn't anything that I was expecting, because I was expecting it to be more like, well, here's Article 1, and in Article 1 they describe that this is going on, and here's Article 2, and it was more about, here's the holes where someone could really take advantage of this. And one of the really good examples that lasted to me is there's a description of oath taking in the Washington State Constitution, and it says something to the fact that I wish I had it pulled up, that oaths will be administered in a way that's binding on the conscience of the person taking the oath. And the instructor points out that Well, that's entirely subjective of the conscience of the person taking the oath. So if the person taking the oath has no conscience, well, that's what the oath's worth. And I was actually bringing that up to someone locally who was talking about, well, they made an oath to do this, and they made an oath to do that, and I said, come look at this Constitution with me. You might want to, I agree with you, but I think if you want to get stuff done, you're barking up the wrong tree, because if this, if for whatever reason something like this came to court, they could pull out the Constitution and say, well, I'm an evil maniac and that's my conscience. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We don't have that. I don't think we have that in our Constitution, but we have something embedded in our Constitution that you guys don't have. And that's regional government is actually embedded into our Constitution.
Oh, yeah. And was that a recent amendment, or does that go way back when?
Early 70s, I think.
Okay. Well, I mean, I call that recent. That's not 1793 or something like that. Yeah.
Back then, yeah. So, in the 70s. So it's embedded in our Constitution.
Ouch.
But that's the thing that citizens aren't aware of. Heck, before I took the Center for Self-Governance training, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't even know there was a state constitution.
Ooh.
So, I didn't know that. I did not know.
Well, I mean, that describes the situation right there. Is that we have fully grown adults that have gone through education, high school, college, whatever, and we're not even told the basic framework.
I had no idea, and that's why you have to learn the basic framework in the system. And I have a master's degree. I didn't know.
Right.
There's so much I didn't know.
Because if we don't know the basic framework, if I come to you and go, well, regional government's doing X, Y, and Z, and you're like, well, I don't know what X, Y, and Z is because I don't know what the basic framework is, so I don't even know what I'm losing.
Yeah.
Right.
And interestingly, when we've been doing our block one or our exercises to get to know people on at the local level, I'll ask them what they think of regional government, and our county council members don't know what it is. So one person said, I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it. Another person said, I think that's home rule, right? Which it's not. And they don't know what regional government is. So this is being implemented without their knowledge. So that's another thing I've been doing, is just going to county council meetings and just giving a quick little 3-minute thing on regional government. Super, super gentle, super, just.
Do you have a written up version of that?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Want to send it to me?
Sure.
I'll even post it in the show notes. That's good stuff. A 3-minute of this is what regional government is. And what's funny about regional government is as soon as it's described to you, this is what it is, you'll see it everywhere. Yeah. Because it's just absolutely everywhere. You're like, oh, that's such and such association. We work with county governments to make sure that you're another piece of the regional government. Environmental this or water that or a school board association this. We look like government, but we're just a private organization that gets everybody together and makes them, puffs their feathers up and makes them feel like they're part of something important, like the National Governors Association, right?
Right. And that's something we're meeting with our legislators about, is letting them know about these associations and the history of the associations and what their policy beliefs are, really. But the regional government, I mean, to have it have so much influence. And the thing is, there is a lot of good on it. It is really efficient. And so I acknowledge all that when I talk to the elected officials. So I don't just go in there, it's terrible and it's going to end the world. I do acknowledge the pluses of it, and I understand why they're using it. But then I let them know some of the downside that they're not even aware of. Right.
Which, I mean, I guess that's the argument from the one boundary republic guys, is this is more efficient.
Right.
Yeah, that's why we want to do it. It's more efficient. And I mean, it'll be a total dictatorship where you don't have any rights, but that's beside the point. It's more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, was there anything else that you wanted to tell me about either the Mom and Pop Alliance, the CSG group, or anything else that you feel like I should have asked that I didn't?
Well, I just think that people need to realize that you don't have to think of politics in the traditional sense. You don't have to necessarily think of it in the sense of parties or even elections. Although our team did decide to do an election years ago, and we did unseat the second most powerful senator in our state. But that's not what we focus. Yeah, it was great. That's not what we focus on, though. If we decide to do that, we know it's going to be a full team effort and lots of planning and all of that. So we don't just do it reactionary. That was another thing I was doing in the past, is I was being very reactionary. Somebody called me, hey, this is happening today. Run down here. Okay, I'm on my way. I'm coming, and it's too late by then. It's baked in the cake. You need to be looking way ahead. And so when we did that senator's race, it was 18 months ahead that we asked him to run, and we promised him we'd stick by him. And
could you please tell a little bit more about the senator's race and how, so you got a small group of people, of CSG students. So like you said, this isn't about how many butts we can get in seats. This is about how,
there were 6 on our team, and there was really
6 on the team that can influence to make this happen. Can you give at least a general description of what that looked like?
Yeah. What that looked like was, we had a guy in office. He was not in any of our district. He was not in our district, but we were trying to get registration by party here in South Carolina. We were using the issued. Yeah, we would have liked to have seen registration by party, but what we were really doing was we were putting that bill down in the State House to see where the players how people would vote. Mm-hmm. And this one guy, who's a Republican, completely kept blocking the vote. He wouldn't let it come up for a vote. And so we actually went and met with him. The guy, we weren't trying to unseat him necessarily. We were thinking we may have to, though. And we said, you don't have to agree with us on this issue, that we're fine with that. But we just want it to be able to come up for a vote, and you're blocking it. And it's something that the Republican Party, should be open to at least letting
voting members,
let everybody vote on it. Let's see. So he blocked it. And at that time, this was several years ago. He'd been in office since '79, but he was very well liked. He was actually a nice guy. And but we approached a guy who used to be in the State House, who ran again and lost. So when we approached him, he's like, "Oh, I'm not going there again." And I said, "No, we will help you." He goes, "Yeah, that's what everybody says," and then they don't. And I said, "No, we will help you. We will not." And so we did. We remained committed. We all had to drive to his district because none of us lived there. And we knocked doors, and we used that registration by party issue. Because we're talking to Republican primary voters, say, did you know that, he's blocking this? And, however you feel about it, we just think it should come up for a vote. Well, yeah, I think that should come up for a vote too. And I didn't know he would do that. And so that was, but it was because we put that bill down there that we had something. And we didn't know it was for sure going to plan out this way, but that's the way it went. And we were outspent 6-1. And Nikki Haley even came to the district for the other guy, and we still won. And that senator is still in office, and he's been phenomenal. He's been so accessible to the people, and he has remained, a true citizen legislator.
So, what was the big thing that this other guy was doing that you wanted him out for? Was it this particular issue on registering by party?
That was one of them. It was that, but there was also just an apathy of, we would like to see it change how judges are appointed in our state. It's a really, we in Virginia are the only 2 states that do it this way, and it's really bad. So, there's things that we would like to see. We'd like to see, school choice come up, and he just been in there a long time. And so he was just very, so. He was a nice guy.
Just sounded like he liked his position, but he was bored with it.
Kind of going along to get along. Yeah. That's, he was definitely in that mode of going along, getting along. And so now, even though we don't focus on campaigns, like I said, but we have decided that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And we have 2 people on our team that are going to run for office. And that's really exciting. And
do you want to tell me what level of office? Or
they're both running for state house rep.
Nice.
Yes. And what's interesting too is when people take Center for Self-Governance training, I've been in this long enough that I've actually not just seen people learn about systematic politics and learn about the system and have, more productive outcomes. I've also seen them grow personally.
Right.
We had a really, really shy guy who now because he had to meet with the legislator, now he's like, oh yeah, I'll go meet with him for lunch. And he's the one who has the great relationship now with the Attorney General. Mm-hmm. And he was not that type of person before. He was very quiet, very reserved, would not reach out to people. And now to see him have all these relationships and a good relationship with our team, it's just been great. And then there was another woman on our team who was kind of reserved. She was very hardworking, but she would stay in the background. And now she's running for office and she's comfortable with it. And
Great.
So I've seen people gain confidence and grow personally in fulfilling their vision of self-governance. And so another thing I did for 5 years is I did this conference called Palmetto Panel, and it was just focused on South Carolina. And I tried to choose issues that people of both sides would care about, like protecting our electrical grid in South Carolina, things that were being done for that, charter schools in South Carolina, free speech on college campuses, topics like that, not so much. And I got to the point where my congressman's like, hey, I'm going to get to speak at Palmetto Panel again this year, right? So, you get to that point, you can build up that type of, the Mom and Pop Alliance just did an event Monday, and Mike Pence came and was our speaker. We didn't pay him. He was willing to come and
just dropping that name. Oh yeah, Mike Pence came to our thing. Big deal. I like your tone. Just Mike Pence. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the type of influence over time.
That's huge influence. An ex-vice president. I said that's huge influence. An ex-vice president, whether anybody likes him or not. Yes, to get a name like that is massive.
Yeah. And that's because I built a great relationship with one of the senators in the town north of us, and he was bringing him in. He said, hey, Diane, would you like him to come? He said, I think he'd really like to join you for a Mom and Pop Alliance event. So we did that. It was amazing. It was really great.
Awesome.
So, but it's just a different style of engagement. And like I said, I think you can tell it's a lot from my tone. It's a lot more fulfilling. Because I was really...
I can tell it's fulfilling and effective, and it's probably fulfilling because it is effective.
Probably,
right?
yes. Yeah. Because I was getting really discouraged and burnt out with what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you're swimming up a river and you just swim for hours and days or whatever, and you don't move position. And you're like, man, I feel like I'm working, but I'm not...
Yeah.
I still have the same scenery around me, right? Versus, now I'm moving. Okay, this is more fun now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to see the team members, it's just like I see this with my employees at work. I'll see them come to us and then, they grow. Like in a year, I see how much they've just grown so much personally. And I love seeing that. And the same thing, you see that within your team. Mm-hmm. So we all have each other's backs and it's really good.
That's spectacular. Well, Diane, that, goes over the list of questions that I had for you, and we're running short on time here. I'd like to thank you again for coming on, and I'd love to have you on again, particularly to hear about whatever issues the CSG group is working through, and these two CSG members that are running for state representative, state senator, both. Which one was it?
State representatives.
State representatives. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and they know they have a team behind them, so that helps. So, and like I said, we don't normally do that, but this was a good situation, and we're excited about it.
Excellent. Was there any last comments?
No, but thank you so much for having me on. I hope people will consider the Center for Self-Governance Training. When I first took it, it was an 8-hour day, and now it's down to 2 hours. So
mine was closer to 8, but I did have 30 people in the room. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, if he said it's truly a paradigm shift.
Yeah, it's a fun 8 hours. Like, don't get me wrong. Like you're like, oh, this is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. The time, it sounds like a long day, but it goes fast. But now it's much shorter and much more concise, and the curriculum is even better than when I originally took it, because I take it I take it fairly often just to
refresh.
Make sure I'm staying up. But refresh, exactly. So anyway, I hope people will consider it and know that you can, as just an ordinary citizen, you can do something. You don't have to have a lot of money or influence, but you can grow that over time. You don't have to be donating to these people, but you can grow. You can still build influence with them.
Great. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. Take care.